Good morning, scientists. Happy Thursday, April 23rd. All right, so as you look at Google Classroom, you guessed it. First of all, you need to watch this video completely. While you're watching the video today, we're going to be grading your homework packet page 5. So have that ready. Go ahead and grade it in Notability if that's easier, and then make sure that you are correcting any mistakes or filling in where your answer isn't as complete, and then resubmit that in the same Show Me folder. That'd be great. We're also going to be finishing the nervous system keynote, so have those keynote handouts ready so that you can be filling in as we go through it. Okay, when we finish, there will be an open note Google reading check. So as it says in Classroom, you can use your notes and handouts. Okay, let's get this party started. Oh, and just so you don't miss out, I am extending the Flipgrid Hip Hop Challenge to the end of the unit, maybe even longer. I'm telling you, I know some of you are just so creative and were thinking, oh my gosh, that's not enough time for me to exercise my creative brilliance. And I don't want to limit you or squash your creativity. So take your time and submit your nervous system hip hop. I'm telling you, please keep those coming. The ones that have come in have brought me so much joy, and I know how much you want to do that. So also don't forget, if you're going to comment on somebody's, positive comments only. All right, so if you would get your keynote handouts out, we're going to talk about reflexes today. You're going to want to know what is the difference between reflexes and then just a normal response. Well, reflexes allow the body to respond without having to think about what action to take. This is typically going to be in a situation where there's pain involved, like stubbing your toe or touching something really hot. They're controlled in your spinal cord, not in your brain. And that is why it can happen so quickly, because that message doesn't have to go all the way to the brain, be decoded, and then be sent to the muscles to carry out the response. It just goes straight to the spinal cord, then to the motor neurons, and then your hand that you have to pull away. And that's why it's so much faster. Then the impulse goes to your brain, and your brain interprets it, and then you feel the pain, and you figure out what to do to make it stop. Put ice on your toe. That's why, have you ever stubbed your toe, and you pull it back right away, and then you feel the pain? That's what happened. It was a reflex. That message just came from your spinal cord and to the muscles in your foot. And then the impulse, the message went to your brain, and it was interpreted as pain. So reflexes are involuntary, they're automatic, and they are a response to a stimulus. It involves what's called a reflex arc. Watch this. It shows it very clearly,
Reflex.
I think.
Reflexes are autonomic, involuntary, and near instantaneous responses to a stimulus. They do not require conscious thought to occur. The reason for that is made clear when you see which neurons are involved in a reflex. A simple connection of neurons will comprise a reflex arc. The simple a sensory neuron and a motor neuron. But many reflex arcs also have a connecting neuron in the spinal cord called a relay or interneuron. If you take a cross-section of the spinal cord, you will see white and gray matter, as well as all the spinal nerves that branch to the sides of the spinal cord. The dorsal or back side of the spinal cord is here, and the ventral or belly side of the spinal cord is here. A simple 3-neuron pain withdrawal reflex arc works like this. The pain stimulus causes an impulse in the sensory neuron, which has an axon that reaches all the way to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. There it synapses with an interneuron, which sends a message to the motor neuron at the end of the ventral horn. The long axon of the motor neuron synapses with the muscles that will contract and pull the finger away from the painful stimulus. So that's stimulus to sensory neuron to interneuron to motor neuron to the effector cell. This happens quickly, in just fractions of a second. And because the response goes to the spinal cord and not to the brain, it'll happen without having to think about it.
Okay, so how this works then is you touch your finger to this bowl that was really, really hot. Remember, it starts with a receptor. It always starts with a receptor. That's what responds to the stimulus. So that receptor then gets the impulse going, and the sensory neuron takes it to the spinal cord. Interneurons then pass it off to the motor neurons that take it to the muscles in your hand, causing you to throw the plate down. Another example. So here, some of this hot cheese winds up falling onto your finger, and once again, the receptor picks up that stimulus, responds to the stimulus and gets a message going, goes by sensory neuron to the interneurons in the spinal cord that hand it off to the motor neurons, to the muscle, causing your arm to contract and to drop the plate. So without even thinking, you pull your arm back in response to the burning food. Okay, drugs and the nervous system. So the way drugs work is they have an impact on your nervous system, and some of them are good, like keeps us from feeling pain. But then others aren't so good. Watch this.
Most people will take a pill, receive an injection, or otherwise take some kind of medicine during their lives. But most of us don't know anything about how these substances actually work. How can various compounds impact the way we physically feel, think, and even behave? For the most part, this depends on how a drug alters the communication between cells in the brain. There are a number of different ways that can happen. But before it gets into the brain, any drug must first reach the bloodstream on a journey that can take anywhere from seconds to hours, depending on factors like how it's administered. The slowest method is to take a drug orally, because it must be absorbed by our digestive system before it takes effect. Inhaling a drug gets it into the bloodstream faster, and injecting a drug intravenously works quickly too, because it pumps the chemicals directly into the blood. Once there, the drug quickly reaches the gates of its destination, the brain. The entrance to this organ is guarded by the blood-brain barrier, which separates blood from the nervous system to keep potentially dangerous substances out. So all drugs must have a specific chemical composition, which gives them the key to unlock this barrier and pass through. Once inside, drugs start to interfere with the brain's normal functioning by targeting its web of neurons and synapses. Neurons are brain cells that have a nucleus, dendrites, and an axon. Synapses are structures placed along the dendrites or the axon, which allow the exchange of electrochemical signals between neurons. Those signals take the form of chemicals called neurotransmitters. Each neurotransmitter plays different roles in regulating our behaviors, emotions, and cognition, but they all work in one of two ways. They can either inhibit the receiving neuron, limiting its activity, or excite it, creating a new electrochemical signal that spreads throughout the network. Any leftover neurotransmitter usually gets degraded or reabsorbed into the transmitting neuron. A drug's effectiveness stems from its ability to manipulate these synaptic transmissions at different phases of the process. That results in an increase or a decrease in the amount of neurotransmitters being spread. For instance, common antidepressants, like SSRIs, stop the reabsorption of serotonin, a neurotransmitter that modulates our moods. This effectively pushes more of it into the neural network. Meanwhile, painkillers, like morphine, raise levels of serotonin and noradrenaline, which regulate energy, arousal, alertness, and pleasure. Those same neurotransmitters also affect endorphin receptors, reducing pain perception. And tranquilizers work by increasing the production of GABA to inhibit neural activity, putting the person in a relaxed or sedated state. What about illegal or illicit drugs? These have powerful impacts on the brain that we're still trying to understand. Crystal meth and amphetamine induces a long-lasting release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter linked with the perception of reward and pleasure. It also activates noradrenaline receptors, which increases the heart rate, dilates pupils, and triggers the body's fight or flight response. Cocaine blocks the reuptake of dopamine and serotonin, pushing more into the network where they boost energy, create feelings of euphoria, and suppress appetites. And hallucinogenic drugs have some of the most puzzling effects. Substances like LSD, mescaline, and DMT all block the release of serotonin, which regulates mood and impulsivity. They also have an impact on the neural circuits involved in perception, learning, and behavioral regulation, which may explain why these drugs have such powerful impacts. Even if some of these effects sound exciting, there are reasons why some of these drugs are highly controlled and often illegal. Drugs have the power to alter the brain's chemistry, and repeated use can permanently rewire the neural networks that support our ability to think, make decisions, learn, and remember things. There's a lot we still don't know about drugs and their effects, both the good and the bad. But those we do know about are the ones we've studied closely and turned into effective medicines. As our knowledge grows about drugs and the brain, the possibilities will also increase for treating the many medical problems that puzzle researchers today.
Okay, would you go ahead and get your homework packet, page 5, out? Go ahead and pause this because I really, really want you to make corrections on your homework sheet. So you can use this for studying, for your study guide, and possibly for an upcoming project. You never know. Okay, so you see that here you were to define the term, and then you were to use these to label this diagram. Okay, so here, the neuron is just another term for nerve cell, which is the working unit of the nervous system. The dendrite, this is the part of the neuron that receives the messages and sends them to the cell body. So those are the key parts here. The axon is the part that sends the message from the cell body to the next neuron. So it takes it away. The synapse is that small space. 5 was neuron, 6 dendrite, you can't really see that, 7 cell body, 8 synapse, 9 axon. Okay, here you were to name 3 kinds of neurons and then describe the function of each. Hopefully, you did both of those. So, the sensory neuron is what picks up information from the receptors. They are in your senses and send them to the brain. The motor neurons take the messages from the brain to the muscles or glands or whatever it is that's going to make the response. And the interneurons are nerve cells that are found in the spinal cord and the brain, and they pass that impulse from the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. And then you can just see 13, 14, and 15. The answers to those are there. Okay, one other thing, as far as the drugs, I don't know that it mentioned this, but it did in the book. The difference between stimulants and depressants, basically what they were saying is that stimulants, and that could be even like coffee, increases the nervous system. Depressants slow it down. So depressants could be medication, but it could also be like alcohol is a depressant. Okay, so it is now time for you to take your Google reading check. Also, if you have a little extra time, start working on that hip hop. And as